and thank you for joining me today in this webcast. I'm a FI consultant. I've been working in SAP for 13 years. I have experience in quite a range of industries, and I focus now specifically on the CapEx space at IQX Business Solutions. Today, we're going to be discussing how we leveraged Fiori-based applications for the capital budgeting process. Today's focus is on Fiori. And Fiori, for those of you that haven't had much exposure to Fiori, it is the SAP's new user experience layer and replaces the old gray SAP GUI client application. Fiori is browser-based, which means that it runs on any device, and quite importantly, our mobile devices. It is the default and most often the only way that users will interact with SAP S/4HANA. The really great news is that even though if you're not on S4 at the moment, but you're on your S4 migration journey, you're still able to actually employ these Fiori-based application technologies because it is available to you today on the SAP ECC6. While we're chatting about Fiori and what it is, I'd like to just find out from you where you are and your organization's at on your Fiori journey. You've got multiple choice to select here from A through to E. Where you're at in your Fiori journey if you are not on Fiori yet, but you're interested to understand more. If you have a few standard apps deployed, maybe you already use some custom Fiori apps, and because this approach makes sense to your organization. Everything is Fiori. You're full in, you're on SAP S/4HANA, and that is your new user interface. Or maybe you're not too sure of where you are on your journey. If you wouldn't just mind taking a moment to just answer that so I can just gauge where you're at. You can just click on A, B, C, D, or E. Okay, I'm going to move over just to see where we're on. Okay, so we have quite a nice mixture. So it's good to know that we do have a few standard apps deployed already, and there's quite a big percentage that isn't on Fiori yet. And we found that it's quite common that we don't have Fiori yet because the change management involved is quite extensive, moving from that GUI screen into your Fiori application. So that is quite common, but we'll find that within this dynamic landscape of Fiori and S/4HANA, you find that the stock standard transactions that are given or delivered with Fiori, they do enhance the user experience, but you'll find that the true value really lies in employing those Fiori applications to streamline a capital budgeting process or business process. So what we'll do today is, in the case study that I'm going to present, we'll be able to see how those applications were employed to streamline the capital budgeting process. Before we delve into the case study, let's just briefly understand why capital budgeting is a prime focus and why Fiori plays a pivotal role. Capital budgeting involves making the informed decisions about long-term investments. And you may be familiar already with an SAP using SAP Project Systems module or the SAP Investment Management module, where we have our WBS elements, our internal orders, our project systems, our investment programs. They're used to control the capital expenditure and to control our budgets. Now, these capital expenditures typically involve significant outlays and have the potential to generate those cash flows in the long term. And a critical upstream part of that whole capital budgeting process is to gain or secure those budget approvals from the senior executives. So before, with our GUI limitations, we found that workflow approval process of being able to gain that the senior executives' approvals of budget for that project that you'd like to invest in there were limitations. So it wasn't as easy to implement that workflow approval process. But now, with the latest Fiori app technology, we're able to achieve that workflow approval process seamlessly. Fiori, in essence, is really bringing your SAP back office to the foreground. It's making it more user-friendly and executive-friendly, and can really be seen as a strategic shift and not just a technical enhancement. You can see that with the Fiori-based applications, as I'll present, they were able to streamline that capital budgeting process. And it's a really great place to start. For those of you that haven't got Fiori yet, it's a really great place that you'd be able to start implementing Fiori applications as a capital budgeting process to streamline that process using those custom built applications. It really does, and if you're if you really are on S4, leveraging Fiori really does enhance and unveils the true value of S4 on the back end. Another question that I have for you is, what are the main tools that you are using currently, in your organization now, in your team, to manage your capital budgeting and expenditure today? Is it Microsoft Word and Excel? Is it SharePoint or Lotus Notes? Is it SAP ERP? So that would be, your investment management maybe, or if it's just project systems with projects, internal orders, WBS elements and such. Maybe it's a combination of A, B, and C, or some form or other. If you could just answer that as well for me. Okay. All right. Excel, the spread mess as we call it. So that is that's very, very common. That's what we find, the combination. We do have sometimes a combination as well of the SAP ERP and Excel. There's some processes that we just can't do on SAP that we are managing in Excel, and trying to bring those two together can be quite difficult. So we'll see in this case study today, as we try, one of the main focuses is that we try to eliminate the use of Excel as much as we can based on those applications. So it is great to see that it's really common, and it's something that a pain point that could easily be addressed through these Fiori-based applications. So our case study today revolves around a large meat processing company. It has operations spanning 500 plants across 24 countries. A diverse set of CapEx processes, with each jurisdiction operating quite differently. So with the company's growth, the standardization was necessary. Complex business processes, and they utilized an assortment of systems for the capital budgeting process, from Excel spreadsheets and email, SharePoint, custom-built CapEx system. So just similarly how most of you answered with using a combination, this is very, very common in the industry. We have to use a combination of Excel and other systems to actually get that whole capital budgeting process from end to end done. Also faced the unique challenge that they were actually on their migration to S4, and they needed to implement this capital budgeting process before the HANA migration was complete. The main objectives of the project were very clear. We had to streamline and automate the CapEx process end-to-end during the migration to S4, leveraging SAP as a single source of truth for everything CapEx related. So having that single source of truth being SAP eliminated that need for the multiple spreadsheets and systems to complete the process, and which in turn eliminated the risks that can be associated with that isolated data. Enabling key capabilities such as aligning processes with market-based practice, including long-term forecasting, project risk listing, scenario analysis, live reporting, and project feasibility, or your ROI analysis. Enhancing the user experience by creating intuitive and user-friendly forms that improve productivity and save time, with integrating requests seamlessly into SAP to reduce low-value manual processes was really important. And with a company of this size and its global operations, the approval process was quite complex and needed to be one that could be easily adaptable. So enabling a flexible, efficient, and transparent workflow approval process from beginning to end was vital for this project. IQX CapEx budgeting and expenditure management integrates deeply with SAP, but provides a more intuitive user experience, tailored classifications, enhanced workflow capabilities, and orchestrated integration. Note that while our clients used SAP Investment Management for budgetary control, we've also implemented solutions without relying on investment management. We have experience also just using internal orders or project systems to control the execution. When it comes to collecting those wish list items, so those projects that you're wanting to invest in before they go into SAP, that analysis that you might be doing in Excel before you go and create the project in SAP and assign the budget, or create the internal order and assign your budgets, we leverage our Stratix online SaaS solution, which enables us to prioritize projects beforehand, be able to rank them, see exactly what we should be investing in, see the impact of those projects would be on our bottom line. And with that SaaS solution integrating seamlessly into Fiori applications, It's a great little add-on to have so that you can do that analysis out of Excel, have a single source of truth before even integrating seamlessly into SAP. As you can see, the diagram below, the capital budgeting process involves many business processes, and not all of them have to be looked at once. As per our case study today, you'll see that not every area was addressed, but the areas that would derive the most benefits or causing the most pain were looked at first. The primary focus for our client was to focus on expenditure requests, the project creation, the capital forecasting, and the project completion. Within the tailored Fiori applications implemented, IQX facilitated optimizing the capital budget requests, the capital budget management, and the capital expenditure request processes. The client was able to classify and justify the CapEx initiatives, and they're able to collaborate, review, and approve more efficiently, upload those wish list items from spreadsheets for mass approval, able to comply with the delegation of authority matrix. They were able to reference budgeted items when raising capital expenditure requests, and improved efficiency and productivity by the automatic integration and creation of project structures into SAP. As you can see from the screenshot below, the applications leveraged off the SAP standard Fiori applications, user-friendly and responsive design, but they were tailored to meet the client's specific needs. The budget wish lists were submitted individually or in bulk through the appropriation request application. So as you can see over here from the screenshot, this appropriation request would have been the Fiori app that would have been used when those budget wish lists needed to be uploaded into the system, into SAP for approval. So the user would come into the appropriation request, for example, and they would create a project that they needed to, they wanted budget for. So this could be an example of a plant engineer needing a new cutting machine, for example. They needed budget for that specific project. So now they were asking, they're creating their wish list. They'd come in, and normally within SAP, you would do this through transaction code IMA 11. But here they're using that Fiori-based application for appropriation request. They would fill in the form that was more intuitive and user-friendly, using the same classifications that they're used to seeing in the backend of SAP. So your cost centers, your company code, your locations, your investment program that you may be selecting during that appropriation request creation is all familiar to the users. You're being able to retrieve that master data from the backend to the foreground enables them to, to be able to use the application much, the change management behind it is much less, because now you're used to seeing those fields. Once the request was populated and was sent for approval, that workflow approval matrix would be called, and then depending on who the business unit or who the appropriation request was for, what plant it was for, it would go through those approval processes. And then would be able to approve or reject, maybe return for any kind of correction that could be resubmitted. And then upon final approval of that, they would then go into SAP and update SAP in the back end automatically. So now instead of having to go and create that appropriation request manually through the transaction code IMA 11, as you would normally if it was for appropriation request, you now have that being taken care of by the integration itself. So that integration would occur, create the appropriation request with the correct status. It would assign all the master data that was on the form against the appropriation request and with the value that had been approved. Next, as part of the process, the annual business planning application would be used to now include those budget wish lists that have just been sent through the appropriation request process to be included within the portfolio of the budget year. So the CapEx controller would come into the annual business planning application and run for the investment program and for their business unit. And all those appropriation requests that had already been approved and submitted would be retrieved, and they'd be able to analyze which projects and prioritize which projects should be included in their budget for that year. Now, we know that your budget consists of different types of investment measures, right? You've got your appropriation requests. You've also got active, projects that are going through procurement already. So that annual business planning application would bring in both the appropriation request and the project, because your budget consists of both, and you need to see a holistic view and the impact it would have on the budget, overall investment program budget, if you included certain appropriation requests, or if you had to change budget that was against a project. So that annual business planning app allowed it to be in one place, retrieve all those investment measures in one place, so that when any amendments are made, any appropriation requests are included in the budget, or then you're able to see the impact on your overall budget, on your overall investment program. So they come in here, they'd be able to go and select the appropriation requests that they wanted, and then upon submitting those requests, a workflow would also be generated to go through the different approvals. And once that approval process was complete, that integration into SAP would occur, and those transaction codes would automatically be run. So in this instance, if you had an appropriation request that was moving from an unbudgeted to a budgeted status, an IMA 11 would be performed where that status would be changed. You'd also get you needed to then move that amount, that budget, and include it in your investment program, include it in your budget, so it would be posted in your investment program budget in IM42. And if you had made any changes on an existing project to the plan value to say, oh, I need more money for a project, maybe I need less, maybe I need to transfer this budget a bit between projects, then you would have an impact on your planning, your KO12, where we would hold that plan figure. So all those transactions would be run automatically as the request integrated into SAP. And finally to now actually go and create the project order, internal order, and assign that budget that's been approved, the capital expenditure request application will be used. So you have the plant manager or engineer go in and now actually ask for that approved budget to be assigned to an internal order so that procurement could take place. Now the capital expenditure requests, when they are raised, a delegation of authority or workflow approval matrix for a capital expenditure request would be triggered, because with those approvals they can be quite complex, with many different areas of the organization needing to be part of that approval process. You might have procurement, the tax, you might have a business unit specific engineer, you might have the CFO or the CEO included depending on the value of the capital expenditure request, and being able to have a very configurable and flexible workflow allowed you to be able to include or exclude depending on the types of requests that you were raising, that the client was raising. So also the really nice, really great part of the capital expenditure request process is that when the request is being raised, a budget item the budget item that was approved in the previous application, your annual business planning, those budget appropriation requests or appropriation requests are now available in your capital expenditure request application selection. So when anyone is approving, managers are approving this request, they know that it was indeed budgeted for. They can see that there was a budget appropriation request that is linked to it, so that they know that they are approving a specific amount that was already approved to be included in the budget, and it wasn't just from this big CapEx pool. They're not too sure where those funds are coming from. So once that capital expenditure request gets approved and integrates into SAP, there's quite a lot that will need to take place in order for your internal order to be created. So you would have, for example, your KO01 transaction being run. You'd have a KO22 where the budget is actually being assigned to the internal order. You would have that appropriation request now being released and replaced by that investment measure of internal order. You also have a distribution of budget that's now being taken from that pool onto the actual project, for so you can track the budget against that specific project or internal order that was created. So with all those transactions that are occurring, that also just occurs seamlessly as the request is integrated. And it really saves the project accountant's time, because instead of having to now go into SAP and do all those steps manually, able to focus on evaluating exception reports and applying corrective actions for forecast and schedule overruns occur for a project. So you really are replacing that low value manual processes with processes that really do bring value. So once the project is created and the budget is assigned, procurement for that newly established project will commence and will continue until the project is ready to be capitalized. So during the duration of the project, costs will need to be reassessed and forecasts need to be made. So IQX were able to facilitate the following processes during the phases of the project lifecycle: the capital forecasting, the budget transfer, project completion, and project analytics. Forecasting is an essential part of the CapEx process, and the forecasting request and approval applications enable our client to reforecast on a monthly basis. So with the forecast request and applications, when they were run, we were able to retrieve the internal orders, the projects that had been created from the previous capital expenditure request, able to retrieve the budget that was assigned, and also retrieve the actuals, so that when reforecasting had to be done, or forecasting had to be done on a monthly basis, or maybe every quarter, we're able to actually track against the actuals that are occurring against that project. So when you're forecasting, being able to see the actuals in the budget that's been assigned, you'd be able to see if you needed, if maybe there's something that's happened with this unforeseen circumstances where you need more budget, or the actuals are, higher or much lower than you expected. And so when you have that information, that real-time information with you when you're forecasting, it makes that reforecasting process much easier and much more accurate. So we also know that Excel remains as a primary tool in this whole process, and and we know that it's not going anywhere. It's going to remain. So we enable the exporting and importing of the templates. So if for any reason any type of analysis had to be done outside of the application, it could be then moved into exported into Excel, where amounts could be changed, and maybe you needed an extra analysis done on Excel, and you'd then be able to import it back into the forecasting app and not have to manually go and change those values. So the exporting and importing allowed for that efficiency. With the forecasting, as there is an approval process that would also be followed, and there's multiple versions of the forecasting that could be done. So within this application, our client was able to do a working forecast where they had a version that would be maintained by the plant managers, and then it would be sent for approval and adoption. So upon approval, it would move into a version that was for the month, and then when that final adoption, where no more changes could be made, and that was your final forecast for the months for that version, it would be moved into a final version that was locked down. So when your next month rolled in, or maybe the next quarter, you need to reforecast, you're able to then retrieve those figures, that final version forecast figures, so that you have a base to start with, and then you're able to actually go and reforecast based on what the previous forecast that was made. So it just really does keep it an easier single source of truth being on within the application. You're storing it within SAP, not on multiple spreadsheets. And so when you retrieve it and when you're manipulating or changing it for the next quarter, you know that your source of truth is correct, and you know where it's coming from. So with the forecasting request application with integration that occurred, we would have, the client was able to have a KO12 and a KPF6 transaction codes automatically integrated, so that the planning version would be created, would be saved every single time, depending on the month they were in, and then it would move on that final adoption out of that working or out of that monthly version into a final version that could be then retrieved as the month rolled forward. With the accurate forecasting and project overruns, the project overruns can be prevented, and in many cases, forecasting will result in budget have to be moved around. So previously I mentioned that within the annual business planning application, we were able to, if you're retrieving those projects that are live, that are occurring costs and already have budget assigned, you might have to maneuver the budget around. Maybe you have to take from one project and assign to another. And that annual business planning request app enabled that budget movement to happen between internal orders within a project if that was needed, or between projects. If one project had overruns and needed to borrow from another project, we're able to use that budget transfer process within that application. It would then also go through approvals, that that the correct people are approving that transfer of budget before the integration would occur, and move that budget from one project to the next. With the same occurring, where you would have that seamless integration and the SAP transaction codes running in the background without any manual intervention needed. When the project is ready to be capitalized, the project completion request application enabled the creation of fixed assets, creation of accurate fixed assets and efficiently, and facilitated in the returning of the remaining budget. So during this process of the project completion request, you'd have the plant manager being ready to now say they're ready to complete the order. There shouldn't be any more POs being raised against it. They could come into the project completion request and choose their internal order. They would then be able to say that they would like to go to TECO and they wanted a specific asset to be created for this internal order. So upon approval, after it goes through the workflow approval process and the integration occurs, you have the AS01 running, where the asset shell is created, and then you've got the KO02 running, which allows for the internal order status to be changed from the release status and AUC into a TECO status. And then you're also able to then assign the settlement rules to that internal order based on what was put into the application. So, an internal order may have multiple assets that need to be assigned during that project completion phase. And so within the application, you were able to split, just like you would if you were doing a KO02 manually and having to assign those settlement rules manually by splitting that 100% allocation between all the assets. You would do the same thing within the application, being able to say, this is my asset class that I want to assign, this is the percentage that I'm assigning it to, this is the cost center I want, the serial number, quantity, all the masks that you're used to assigning in AS01. And then upon final approval on integration, all those asset shells will be created, the settlement rules will be assigned accordingly against the internal order. You would also have this internal order being changed to being the status to be TECO, and then the settlements can be run as per usual through your SAP transaction codes like KO88, etc. So after that settlement was run and you're now ready to close the order, the project completion request application also facilitated in that process, where you'd come back into the app and run it for that internal order that you needed to close. You then indicate that you wanted that internal order closed and any budget to be returned that was remaining. So this, when upon approval of that request, the internal order and the project can then be moved into a closed and completed status, and anything that was remaining on the budget, so the budget minus that spend, anything that was remaining could be freed up and removed from the internal order and moved back to that pool, so that that budget could be used for any other projects and just be freed up for that business unit. So that would all be taken care of as the request integrated. And then finally, in our investment measure analytics app, we were able to, in our reporting applications, we were able to enable our clients to have real-time data of the actual spend, the approved budget, and the forecasted costs, enabling them to make timely decisions. So that forecasting that would have occurred in the forecasting and request application, that final version could be pulled into the investment measure analytics app application, and you could then compare your current budgets, your actuals, that forecast, your actuals also including your commitments that you can see what's still to come, and anything that's remaining. Another question for you is, what are the major challenges with managing capital expenditure today? So you find the business case quality and comparability, the budget preparation and maintenance? Is it your forecasting expenditure accurately? Is it completing project creating assets and returning unused budget, or monitoring budget availability? Okay, forecasting is coming up as a very high percentage. 50% is forecasting. We found that quite a lot in with our current clients that may not even have the forecasting application will often speak about how we can address forecasting to make it easier, because everything is normally Excel based, and being able to actually forecast accurately is very, very difficult. So that is quite a common one that we see. And hopefully that forecasting expenditure application, the fact that we bring through actuals and bringing through commitments and the budget, really does help with being able to forecast accurately, having that information and that single source of truth being, SAP being able to store and bring back every single time you reforecast, being able to see which forecasted previously so that you can then see how far off you are when you have to reforecast every month or every quarter. The SAP Fiori applications provided a more user-friendly and intuitive experience and allowed for the ease of integration to SAP, improving the capital business process and driving the change that the client wanted. IQX was able to deliver CapEx-specific Fiori applications that drove the desired change. The advantages of incorporating the pre-packaged CapEx-specific applications were transformative. We're able to drive compliance to the delegation of authority workflow approval matrix. We're able to provide transparency in project approvals and budget monitoring, enabling the project governance, improved efficiency with user-friendly forms, flexible workflows, and seamless integration. We're able to tailor to the client-specific requirements due to the ease of how easy it was to configure the applications, and the timely implementation during an S4 migration, tailoring solutions for seamless integration to both ECC and S4. Specifically with the need of being able to streamline the capital budgeting process during the S4 migration was an area that was quite tricky, but we're able to, within our applications that we were provided, we were able to provide an administration application which allowed the company codes, the business units, the plants to be linked to a specific backend, so that as they were going through the S4 migration and moving more company codes and business units onto S4, they're able to easily just change that administrative application to say, okay, this company code no longer points to this backend, it's no longer an ECC backend, it's not S4 backend. So simple, just being able to having that ease of configurability of just changing the backend of the company code and the projects. They were able to then, as the migration is happening, they're able to then just change the IQX specific, CapEx specific applications to go along with the S4 journey. The standard Fiori apps focus specifically normally on an SAP transaction and transaction code and just associated data model. So they must also cater for all possible scenarios, and hence they often suffer reduced usability compared to a tailored solution. IQX focuses on removing data that's not required and hiding complexity that's only exposed to the super users or any of those complex edge case scenarios. It's not only about simplifying the process, but also extension where we provide business data that may not be in SAP, but it is actually needed in the decision-making process. The IQX Fiori apps are compatible with both ECC and S/4HANA, offering full customization for optimal user and process experience. They provide workflow by adding a staging layer and a configurable workflow engine, enabling collaborative processes and transforming Fiori into a comprehensive business process management tool. IQX apps also integrate all necessary information into a single request and with orchestrated integration, streamlining the user experience and improving their operational efficiency. The implementation of the CapEx-specific Fiori applications enabled our clients to sunset legacy systems, and which saved them license fees and maintenance, enhance the user experience with the friendly and intuitive UI, which reduced the CapEx cycle time with a more efficient Fiori-based IQX workflow, enabled the leveraging of new capabilities in the CapEx process, enabled greater transparency in tracking of budgets, and enabled agility as the business processes develop and evolve. And the question is, what benefits are you seeking to achieve from integrating the CapEx process? Do you want to speed up the CapEx approval process? Do you want to ensure compliance with charts of authority? Make better capital allocation decisions? Eliminate manual rekeying of information? Or more timely and reliable budget status reporting? Just answer that. speed up the CapEx approval process, that's quite high, and more timely than our budget stage reporting. Yeah, so I think that approval process is always quite an area of concern because there are so many parties involved. So really implementing a workflow process that can be flexible and adaptable, and also one that it's easy to maybe send those reminder emails or get the people to approve it, the reminder that they haven't approved it, and make the approval process easier already is a great place to start to speed that up. So hopefully what I've shown today will be a great use for that approval process, speeding up that approval process. Within every project, we always have lessons that we can learn from. And during this project, I just want to highlight some of the lessons that we learned. If you're on your S4 migration, or if you're looking to employ a Fiori-based application for any business process, these are just things that we could use that we've learned from. With the legacy systems that you maybe, or legacy processes that you are replacing, that comes with data migration. And it can get quite tricky when you're changing the way you do things. So data migration needs to really be thought through and documented, so the necessary steps can be performed to align to the new processes. Especially if you're in your S4 HANA journey, as your migration may need to take place more than once. If you're staggering that migration, you might have to do that migration multiple times. And if you get that legacy system, that data migration down and documented, it will always, that next time you have to do it, you'll learn from that first time and be able to improve that migration the second and third time that you're moving to S4. Getting your user access rights and profiles optimized is always a challenge, especially if you're changing the way you're doing things. If you're changing processes, you might have to rethink who is doing certain process and who gets the rights to perform that. So, but the key benefit of Fiori is that it's a mechanism that's quite familiar. But you obviously the work of deciding who needs to do what, and if processes are changing, who needs to do those new processes, it still remains. Time and resources on user acceptance testing and the cutover process. Those, especially with user acceptance testing and finding those business case scenarios, and making sure that now that you're replacing certain transaction codes with the Fiori-based applications and doing a more streamlined business process approach, you need to make sure that it is catered, those business scenarios are catered for in the new process. So during that UAT, being able to find those little business scenarios that just pop up once or twice is really important, because you obviously then be able to cater for those before you go to production and then have to scramble. User training is obviously key to adoption and successful utilization of the applications. The challenge here is typically not the data entry. It's very intuitive to enter the data, but it's more familiarizing yourself or the users with any new classification and the process changes. So, if things are changing to be business processes are changing, you might need to change the way you're assigning certain master data or certain categorizations, and maybe familiarizing the users with that process change. That part of the change can be tricky. So the earlier they get it, the better. As with any processes, users can struggle with the changes as they need to see it. So starting with the operational apps and undergoing a process of refinement cycles can help elicit more sophisticated requirements. The earlier you get the apps into the user's hands, the more you can cultivate a culture of continuous improvements and feedback. In conclusion, our journey with our clients exemplifies the potential of Fiori applications to revolutionize and streamline the complex business processes. IQX, as the CapEx experts, embraces a role that goes beyond technicalities, focusing on business value, risk, reward, productivity, and strategy. Thank you so much for your attention today, and I look forward to any questions and discussion.
Hi, Heather. Thanks so much. We have a few questions that have come in, and if you have any questions, please go ahead and enter them in that Q&A box, and we will be getting to them now. So the first question is this solution applicable to Cloud Private Edition on-premise or Cloud Public Edition?
Can I please answer that offline? I'm not 100% sure about that. I'd have to speak to my technical colleagues about that, so I can get back to you.
Absolutely, no problem. And then does this application come with the base version of SAP, or is it an add-on?
So these are customized applications. So you would obviously need to have SAP, and then these are baseline applications that we employ, and then we customize according to your needs. So it is a custom add-on, as you said it as an add-on, but it's a custom application that's implemented.
Great. So does SAP provide any standard Fiori apps for CapEx?
So there would be the standard applications such as creating your internal order, assigning your budgets, creating your your projects or your WBS elements. Those are the standard Fiori applications that would come with your usual SAP Fiori implementation. It's just not as business process driven. It's more specific to the transactional codes that are run, just as that you would run in your SAP GUI.
Great. So our processes are very complex. How configurable are these apps?
They are very configurable. So we do have these applications, of baseline applications that are, so that's it's quicker to just to implement them and get them running. But then depending on your requirements, if you needed to do something a little bit simpler or more complex, you would then be able to tweak those to your needs. So as configurable as you need them to be.
How nice. Thank you. Okay, so the next question is regarding migration. If we're still on ECC but moving to S/4HANA late in 2025, can we still implement these Fiori-based applications?
Yes, we can. So just like with this case study, we were able to implement it, in the migration to S/4HANA. You can do it with both backends. We were able to feed both backends with using the specific frontend and RFCs. It's a bit more technical than I understand. I just know that we are able to do it, and so we can have on your journey to S4, if you want to get this up and running, if you want to build a business case for capital budgeting on Fiori, doesn't matter what your backend is, we're able to do it and seamlessly move to S4 as you move to S4.
Great. This might be a question to answer offline. But the question is, what is the minimum support pack and/or enhancement pack level required on ECC 6.0 for integrating this Fiori app?
Yes, that is a question offline. I'm sorry, it is a bit more technical. Yeah, so we can get back to you on that, Brian.
No problem. So yes, for the questions we're going to be answering offline, we will get back to you. We have your email addresses, and so we will get back to you after this webcast. So if there are any questions, please go ahead and enter them in that Q&A box. Otherwise, that is all the questions we have for now. Do you have any last words you'd like to say? Last nuggets of wisdom?
No, all good. Thank you so much for your time, and I really appreciate it. I hope I've enlightened you a bit about how we can leverage Fiori applications to enhance your capital budgeting process. If you have any questions or anything, just reach out to us, and we're able to assist you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Heather. And as you can see, Heather's email address is on the screen right now, heather.powell@iqxbusiness.com. And you will receive a post-event email, as always, with a link to the on-demand version of this webcast. It's the same link you registered at. And please go ahead and fill out that 2-question survey for us. So thank you so much for joining us today, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much.